Okay. One of our good friends, dear friends, asked if I could dedicate this class to a person whose name was Nachman Daniel ben Miriam Ilana, also known as Donnie Morris, who was, unfortunately, he was one of the people that passed away in Meron in that terrible accident that happened on the day of Lag BaOmer, the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or rather, let's not call it the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but the elevation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and I'll explain why in due course, like why I'm stressing it that way. In any event, this class is dedicated to Ilui Nishmato, to the ascent of his soul to higher and higher levels, and may his family find peace and comfort, and not know from such tragedy again ever. Okay. Let me just check the chat. Yeah, I see there's, oh, okay. All right. I must have hit the wrong button. Okay, so again, Lag BaOmer, hundreds of thousands of people went up to Meron. They go up to Meron. They're like bonfires. The bonfires are in commemoration of the ascent of his soul to a higher, to ever higher levels, and commemorates also and memorializes the idea that he spread light in the world through his book called the Zohar. The Zohar means it's the book of light, the book of radiance, the book of splendor, some people call it, but in essentially one of the ideas of light, Zohar. And he lit up the world with his wisdom, with his understanding, with his compassion, with his holiness and righteousness, and so on and so forth. So may it be for Nachman Daniel ben Miriam Ilana, Donnie Morris, who passed away on that day in Meron. Unfortunately, he was one of the people that was killed in the crush over there. What exactly happened, we don't need to go into, but unfortunately, there was some human error that led to the tragedy. In any event, the question is how we deal with, how should we deal with tragedies? And I hope to answer that by examining a few verses where another event happened on an extremely holy day. The day of the dedication of the temple. As you probably know, the temple, the tabernacle in the desert had been built, and Moses erected it and took it down for 7 days. On the 8th day was the final day when the tabernacle was going to be erected and would remain erected until they journeyed on their journey through the desert to the land of Israel. They were not supposed to be in the desert for a very long time at all, but they built the tabernacle, and on the 8th day, the two sons of Aaron, it was a day of tremendous celebration. Obviously, this was the tabernacle, the place in which it says, V'asuli migdash, v'shachanti b'tocham, they should make for me a temple, and I will dwell among them. I will dwell in the temple. The divine presence was revealed in the temple, the tabernacle. Above the ark, the divine presence was revealed, obviously not in a physical way, but it could be sensed. And that was revealed, and that was the intention, in fact, of building the tabernacle, the temple. And that was the whole purpose, essentially, of creation, for divinity to be, godliness to be revealed in this world in one way or another. The sages explain, "V'shachanti b'tocham," I will dwell among them, it says, not I will dwell in it, in the temple, I will dwell among them, meaning to say in each and every person. Divinity dwells, godliness dwells within the temple, that is with each and every person. Some people are more aware of it, some people are less aware of it, some people are not aware of it at all. But nevertheless, there it is. There is godliness that resides in each person, and that is called the godly soul, the nefesh elokit, the godly soul. In any event, on that day, on the 8th day, which was a day of tremendous joy, tremendous happiness, the consecration and dedication of the tabernacle, and the beginning of the divine service of the Israelites on behalf of the entire world, because that was the purpose of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. It wasn't something private, a private edifice. It was meant to bring godliness into the entire world and manifest that godliness. But the two sons of Aaron, whose names were Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, each took a incense pan, and they brought incense as a sort of they went into the Holy of Holies, which is a highly restricted area that they were not really allowed to go into. And they brought this incense as an offering at that time. And the verse says like this: "Vayakrivu livnei Hashem esh zara," and they offered a foreign and alien fire, asher lo tziva otam, which they had not been commanded. Because they had not been commanded, this was an alien fire. It was regarded as an alien fire. Now, we'll explain this as we go along, but in any event, what happened then? Vateitze eish milifnei Hashem, and fire came out from heaven, vatochalotam, and consumed them, vayamutu lifnei Hashem, and they died before God. Moses then turns to Aaron on this day that was supposed to be the day of absolute rejoicing and happiness and so on. And then this tragedy occurs to Aaron. And Moses turns to his brother Aaron and he says to him, and Moshe says to Aaron, Hu asher diber Hashem lemor. This is what God said, Bikrovai ekadesh. Amongst those holy ones, with my holy ones, I will be sanctified. In other words, this was not a moment of what could be called Chilul Hashem, a desecration of the name of God. But on the contrary, it was an elevation of the name of God. Bikrovai ekadesh, amongst those who are close to me, I will be sanctified. In other words, in a sense, they were lifted up to that level of closeness to God, which Moses and Aaron themselves did not experience. As Rashi, the classic commentator, points out, I thought, Moses said to Aaron, I thought that on this day it was either going to be you or me that would ascend on high, and I see that they are holier than us. They ascended, they were the ones that ascended on high. And and what was Aaron's response to this statement of Moses? It says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was silent. He remained silent. He didn't say anything. He kept quiet. Now, he's keeping quiet is an interesting response. What does it mean that he kept quiet? Well, first of all, as we unfortunately see in many cases, immediately a tragedy occurs, people start trying to explain it and to justify it in some sense or another, explain it or explain it away, and this is exactly what Aaron did not do. He did not make any such statements that he certainly didn't say they deserved it. He certainly didn't say that, and he didn't say anything by Yidom Aaron. He kept silent. And he's praised highly for actually keeping silent. And that's actually a lesson to us all, that when tragedy happens, we can't always make sense of it. We have to just accept it the way it is and understand in the bigger picture that everything that God does for the good. So what the good that comes out of it, maybe we don't always know. Moses did point it out. He said, Bikrovai ekadesh. God was sanctified through these who are close to him. And in fact, they became even more close to him because they ascended on high, as we'll speak about further on. But there is a midrash. Now, midrashic literature is rabbinic literature from It's early rabbinic literature after the time of the Talmud. Most of the midrashim are after the time of the Talmud, in the century or two, or three or four after the time of the Talmud. But they are very early rabbinical works, and some of them are very cryptic. There is one particular midrash which is called the Midrash Pliya, the astonishing midrash. Because of sometimes the astonishing statements that it makes. And this happens to be one of them. So the Midrash asks the following question. It says, Vayidum Aharon, Aharon was silent, Aaron was silent. So the Midrash asks, well, what was he supposed to say? There's many explanations, but what could Aaron have said? What could Aaron have said? That's what the Midrash asks. And the Midrash answers the following. He says as follows. The Midrash says as follows. On the 8th day, you shall circumcise the flesh of his foreskin. On the 8th day, a young boy on the 8th day should be circumcised. That's what the Midrash answers. That's what Aaron should have said. Or that's what he could have said. Not that he should have said, but he could have said, on the 8th day, he shall be circumcised. He could have quoted that verse. Now, what the connection is to our, to the story here is somewhat puzzling. Yes, true, both of them mention the 8th day, because on the 8th day, this was the 8th day of the consecration of the tabernacle. And the 8th day is when a boy is brought into the covenant of circumcision. Of course, if the boy is not healthy on the 8th day, then it can wait. But the 8th day is when it's traditionally done. And so Aaron should have said, on the 8th day you shall circumcise. He could have quoted that verse, we shall circumcise the foreskin of his foreskin. Now, what did the what did the Midrash mean by this? So there's one very interesting explanation, which is as follows. The explanation says like this. What is the purpose of bringing a young boy into the covenant? Why is a boy at the age of 8 days old only brought into the covenant? Because this is what's called a netinat koach. It's giving him the possibility to be able to grow up in a state of holiness where many of the impediments to his spiritual advance have been removed. The impediments to his spiritual advance have been removed by removing the foreskin. The foreskin is, according to the Zohar, that only appeared after the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't there before. It's a result of the sin of knowledge, the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and therefore it has to be removed. In other words, it's what's called the klippa, the shell, or the I guess the skin, but it's called klippa. Klippa is a negative term for the forces that conceal holiness. It's called klippa, the force that conceals holiness. So it's kind of a shell, or in this case, a foreskin that prevents the yesod, the male organ, which is called yesod, prevents the male organ from being revealed. In other words, the head of the male organ from being revealed. And once that is removed, it is symbolic of, and not only symbolic of, it actually enables holiness to be spread. I'm looking for a different word. Spread is not the right word. Propagated, yeah, to be propagated in the proper manner, to be propagated in the proper manner. So Aaron could have said, on the 8th day, you shall circumcise the flesh of his organ, this foreskin of his organ, meaning to say Aaron could have said, they had their whole lives before him. These were young boys, they weren't married. They were youngsters, essentially. They had not yet married. And they were at the beginning, in a sense, they were at the beginning of their lives. Yes, they were already obviously more than 8 days old. But just like the time of circumcision, when a boy is just beginning his life, so too at their stage of life, they were youngsters, and they were just entering into the covenant of the Torah and mitzvot. They were just entering. So Aaron could have said they just started their lives. They were youngsters. They weren't married yet. They had not yet done almost anything. They were sort of still under parental care almost. And therefore, why would they be taken away when they now have the opportunity to do whatever it is that they need to do? In other words, the question was, since godliness is brought down, is elicited through our actions, through what it is that we do, in other words, through fulfilling the commandments and doing the mitzvot. These boys were very young boys, and they were just about to start doing that, and then they were plucked from the world, and that was the end of their opportunity to actually do anything. And that's what the meaning of the verse is. You have to remove the foreskin. In other words, there's something that has to be done in order to rectify the world. They were about to start rectifying the world, and therefore they thought, the opinion of these young boys was, godliness is not going to come down from above into the temple. It's not going to be revealed into the temple by itself, into the tabernacle by itself. We have to do something. That's why they brought that fire. That's why they brought the incense, and the fire descended from above and in fact consumed them. Because they thought that, and to a certain extent correctly, that holiness does not happen by itself. You have to do something. Just as holiness does not happen by itself, you have to remove the klippa, you have to remove the foreskin, you have to remove the orla. Something has to be done. And then holiness can descend into the world. Aaron could have argued that, but he didn't argue that. Why did he not argue? Because Aaron understood that human understanding of what needs to be done, and especially on such a holy day, when this was the building of the tabernacle and the consecration and dedication of the tabernacle, especially on the 8th day, was a world-changing event. It was, how could you say? It was a tidal wave. It was an entirely new perspective on things. When there's an entirely new perspective, when something new comes into the world that was never there before, and is elicited from an extremely high place, man should not intervene. It's not our place to elicit what we feel is necessary. It's our place to sit back and vayidom Aaron, and to be silent. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in the Ethics of the Fathers that says, Shtika sayag lachochma. Silence is the fence around wisdom. There's actually an interesting sort of a joke, I guess you could call it, where, sorry about that. There's an interesting joke where they say, remain silent and be thought of as a wise person, then open your mouth and prove the opposite, and prove that you're a fool. So the sages didn't mean it in that sense. They didn't mean it as a joke. They meant it very seriously, that silence is the fence around wisdom. In other words, if one wants to acquire wisdom, one has to be silent. Aaron understood that silence was the appropriate response in this particular case, because shtika sayag chokhmah, the thing that surrounds chokhmah is silence. In the Kabbalistic sense, that means that it is keter that surrounds chokhmah. The sphira that transcends chokhmah, the sphira that transcends all of the sphirot, is the sphira of keter. And keter is what is called shtika. That is called silence. So that silence of Keter is what allows there to be the first revelation in Chokhmah. Chokhmah is called Reshit Chokhmah. The beginning. Chokhmah is the beginning. The beginning of what? The beginning of revelation. In other words, the beginning of revelation was the revelation of the divine presence in the tabernacle, and Aaron understood that the proper response is shtika, to be silent in order for that to happen. Now we see, I'll talk more about the concept of fire and various other things soon. Let me just finish this idea. When Jacob was on his way back from the house of Laban, and he was about to enter the land of Israel, the angel of Esau tried to prevent him and fought with him. Vayavek imo ish, the angel of Esau, that's how our sages explained it, was the angel of Esau fought with him, he wrestled with him. And Jacob prevailed. He prevailed over this angel. The whole story I'm not going to go into, but he prevailed over this angel, and then the angel gave him a new name. He acquired for himself a new name. Instead of the name Jacob, he acquired the name Israel, Yisrael, which indicates a completely different level of divine awareness. The name Yaakov is usually explained as the way the name Yaakov is spelled, Yud Ein Kuf Bet. Yud Ein Kuf Bet. That Yud represents Chokhmah, which is at the level of the heels, the Akev, the Akavayim, the Akev. Yud Akev. Yaakov spells the word Yud Akev, when the divine presence, or even the soul, is on the level of the heels. In other words, it's the lowest possible level. It's at the lowest possible level. And that's why Jacob had to struggle. He struggled against his brother Esau. He struggled against against Laban, and so on and so forth. He had to go through a period of tremendous struggle until he overcame. And essentially, who did he overcome? He overcame the descent within himself. And then he ascended to the level of Yisrael. Yisrael is called Yashar Kel, the straightness, the straightforwardness of God, or Shir Kel. The name Yisrael is also Shir, the song of God. So he became, therefore, the song of God and the straightforwardness, if you want to call it, of God. Yashar Kel, the straightforwardness of God. And he ascended up to a much higher level at that point in time. Right after this is when Rachel passed away. Rachel passes away. Why did Rachel pass away? So one of the explanations of it is that Rachel was, Jacob, Yaakov had 4 wives. Rachel was his most beloved wife, and the one that was closest to his own soul. And they say that therefore when Jacob ascended up to a higher level, to the level of Israel, he had descended to a whole new level. Rachel, in her physical body, as she was down here, was not able to accompany him in that way. and therefore she passed on, she passed away. In other words, her soul ascended with him. Her body did not ascend, but her soul ascended with his ascent. I would like to suggest that that's exactly what happened on Lag BaOmer, with the ascent, as we know, on the Yortzeit, on the day of the passing of any person, and particularly when we're talking about a tzaddik, a righteous, a holy, a very holy man, extremely holy person, a person who was the author of the Zohar, the one who lights up all of the world, and about whom the sages say, Kadai Rabbi Shimon lismoch alav b'shas hadachak, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai the Rashbi, you can rely on him in times of trouble. Now, this means in halachic terminology, in Jewish law, it means that his opinion in Jewish law could always be relied upon. If you don't know what the law is, you can always rely on his opinion. But it means much more than that. It means that at any time of trouble, when you're in trouble, you can turn to Rabbi Shimon and ask for his help and guidance. Now, the soul of any person is eternal, and therefore, how much more so the soul of a great tzaddik, the soul is always eternal because it's part of God above. Chelek Elokam Imal. Mamish is part of God above that's clothed in the body, and therefore the soul itself is eternal. And Rabbi Shimon can then intercede on our behalf in heaven, and do what needs to be done in order to rescue the person from his time of trouble. Also, Rabbi Shimon is the one that says about himself, Yachol ani liftoras olam kulam min adin. I can exempt everybody from judgment. In other words, what that means is that Rabbi Shimon was able to always bring out the good in everybody so that judgment would not be pronounced upon that person. In other words, harsh decrees. In any event, that was the Rashbi, that was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. On the day of his passing, the day of the passing of anybody, the day of the passing of a tzaddik in particular, the soul ascends to a higher level. And those souls that had an attachment to him, just as the soul of Rachel, who had an attachment to Jacob when he ascended to the level of Israel, she couldn't go with him physically because she had not been rectified in the physical sense yet, because this was the time before the Torah was given, and therefore her physicality could not be rectified. But she ascended with Jacob in his ascent anyway. She only ascended in soul. I would like to suggest that that's what happened over here. These souls that were obviously attached to Rabbi Shimon's soul, because they were there in Meron on Lag BaOmer, with his ascent, they too ascended. Yes, it's tragic, and yes, it's especially tragic for the families that were left behind. But we have to be able to understand that without explaining the tragedy and why that particular thing happened at that particular time to that particular person or those particular people, but just to accept that that's what happened and to be able to understand and see the best in it. And the best in it is that, without doubt, in my mind, they rose with Rabbi Shimon to a whole new level and simply left their bodies behind as a result. Now, this was obviously divine providence, because nothing happens that is not divine providence. It's all accounted for. And therefore, we have to just say that's what God wanted, and that's what happened. Now, there are a couple of questions. Let me just see the chat here because I want to answer the questions. Okay. So Yael said, Aaron did not say anything because he knew that he would be the one to die, and Moshe also told him not to mourn in any way and to accept the occurrences. Yes, that's true. He didn't know that he would die, but there was certainly that possibility, yes. Is there a description of the fire? I just said that fire came out from God. Now, interestingly enough, the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous Kabbalist, explains that Nadav and Avihu, these two sons of Aaron, were called Chain Palge Gufa. They were two halves of one body. And that's why they didn't marry. They hadn't married yet because there were two halves of one body, and their souls, the souls of each of them formed one body, so to speak, formed one entity, one unit, and therefore marriage was not in the cards for them. They were very young anyway, but marriage is not in the cards for them because the soul of each of them completed the other, in the sense that there was in some sense or another, there was no need for them to get married. There was no drive for them to get married because their souls were complete already. And but what happened then when they died is that they became one soul. The two halves joined into one, and then immediately they descended again into who? Anyone know? Into Pinchas, Phineas, Pinchas. They became the soul of Pinchas, and Pinchas was another person who sanctified the name of heaven when he saw illicit and extremely distasteful public display of sexual behavior. He did what he felt he had to do, and he got rid of those two people who were fornicating in public and making a disgrace of in a holy place and so on. He got rid of them. He killed them. He drove a spear through them, and he was then elevated to the status of being the Kohen. He was elevated to the status of the two sons of Aaron becoming one. What kind of fire? There's no real description of the fire other than there was a fire that descended from heaven, but it was obviously a holy fire, Eish Kodesh. Yeah, fire is essentially, in this sense, Ben is asking what's the significance of the fire here. Fire is, in this sense, the idea of it's on the one hand the idea of illumination. That's the fire in the burning bush. It's the idea of illumination, but it's also the idea of something that you shouldn't come too close to. Moses was told, don't approach, because this fire is, when there's a very high level of holiness, you have to keep your distance, because getting too close is obviously, for those of us who are not sufficiently holy, and Moses at that time was not even allowed to come that close, is simply dangerous to continued life in this world. In any event, hellfires I wouldn't worry about too much. Is a connection to the gematria of the number 45. There is a connection to the gematria 45. There were 45 people who died there. This is according to some. I'm not going to say that this is my explanation, but this is an explanation that's given, that 45 is the name called the name Ma, the name of Tikkun. The name of Tikkun. Let me just write Pinchas. Yeah, Pinchas is spelled like that. Yeah, Pinchas, Pinchas. That's correct. So 45 is related to 45 is also the gematria of Adam, of man, Adam, Aleph Dam, but it's also the name of the name of Tikkun. And there's a point here that I forgot to mention. We said that Rachel could not ascend because her body had not yet been rectified, but there are those that say that her ascent when Jacob ascended was in fact her rectification. So this idea, there's only a hint over here to a certain rectification that happened with these people who were killed. There were 45 of them, and it's related to the name Ma. Where does the name Ma come from? Ma is 45 in Hebrew, Mem 40, Hey 45. Where does the 45 letter name come from? The 45 gematria of the name. If you spell out the name, Yud K Vav K. If you spell it out, the divine name, let me just show you on the screen here. Here. If you spell out the name Yud, that's the Yud, and we put a dash between them because you're not supposed to really write the holy name just like that. So Yud Hey Vav Hey. I don't know why it's green, but it is. So that Yud Hey Vav Hey could be spelled out in full. It could be iterated, I think is the expression in English. It could be iterated in different ways. Let me get a blue, I prefer. Yeah. Okay. Yud, so Yud could be spelled, Yud is always spelled Yud Vav Dalet. I'm not a greenie. Okay. Hey could be spelled Hey Aleph. Hey Aleph, it could be spelled Hey Yud. And it could be spelled Hey Hey. The Yud is always spelled the same way, right? Hey Hey, it could be spelled one of these ways. Then the Vav could be spelled Vav Aleph Vav. Vav Aleph Vav. It could be spelled Vav Vav, just Vav Vav, right? And the Hey again could be spelled Hey Aleph, Hey Yud, Hey Hey. Now these are the different gematrias. If you spell it this way, Yud, Hey Vav, and then Hey again would be Hey Aleph, right? That makes the gematria of 45. That's the numerical value of 45. Why 45? Because the Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Dalet is 4, that's 20. This is 6, so that's 26. Vav Aleph Vav is 13, and Hey Aleph is again 6, that makes altogether 45. There's a 45 letter name, there's a 72 letter name, there's a 63 letter name, and a, not letter, I'm sorry, 63 gematria name, and a 52 gematria name out of the various ways of spelling the divine name. The name, when it's spelled Yud Hey, Vav Vav Hey, so it would be Vav Vav Hey, that's Yud again, yeah, the Yud would be there. So that would be 52. Now, what's the what's the hint over here? 45 is the gematria of Adam, of man, Adam. And what's man? Adam is that's also 45. Adam is Aleph Dam. Aleph represents the soul, the one who gave us the soul, the one, in other words, God, who is invested in the blood of the person Dam. A person's life force depends on his blood, right? So the Aleph Dam makes the word Adam. In other words, Adam is 45. 52 is the gematria of the word for an animal in Hebrew, behema, right? That's Adam ubehema toshi Hashem, man and animal God will rescue, he'll save, he'll save them from destruction. But the whole point is that this name over here, the name Ma, rectifies the name Ban. This is called the name Ban, right? The 52, gematria 52, that name is called Ban, which is spelled like this, Ban, right? And the other one is spelled this, the 45 is spelled Ma, Shema. And Ma is what rectifies Ban, right? So the 45 over there, in other words, the 45 people that passed away are in some sense or another, possibly, it's possible that they were some kind of rectification of what needed to be done. The fact that they were rectified and that they rectified something and passed on means they passed on to a higher level. Just as when Jacob rectified Esau by defeating the angel of Esau, the guardian angel of Esau, and then he was given a new name and he arose to a higher level, and Rachel arose with him but passed away at the same time. So too, I would suggest that that's exactly what happened here. These souls were obviously doing some kind of rectification and therefore arose with Rabbi Shimon's ascent and that's what happened. They ascended. Okay, let's see now. Should we all aspire to be like Shimon, a desire to relieve all men of relieve all men of judgment, of harsh judgment? Something we should all strive for. Yes. In fact, if you have a look on the website, not the website, on my website also, KabbalahDecoded.com, but it'll only be there tonight. I'm gonna put this recording afterwards, but it's on our YouTube channel. Have a look on the YouTube channel, which is Kabbalah Decoded. I believe it goes like this: youtube.com/C/ C stands for channel /C/ Kabbalah Decoded. You have a look over there. If anyone doesn't know it, you know what? I'll just write it out for you here. youtube.com/C/ Kabbalah Decoded. I think that's it. Yeah, that should be it. And if you click on that, you'll get to our channel. And I gave a lecture last week to a different group, not to this group, and it was recorded as well and put on the put on YouTube. That discusses this whole issue of the tikkun that Rabbi Shimon did and what it was all about. Yacholani, he said, I am able to relieve the entire world, or to exempt the entire world from harsh judgment. And how that exactly happened, what that means, what he did in order for that to happen, is explained in that class if anyone wants to look at it. Okay, any other questions? By the way, my my wife said I should let everybody know that I do private consultations. Well, I decoded, yeah, that's it, yeah. Oh, Psalm 106, where was that? I'm not sure where that was. Oh. Is that the Pinchas referred to in Psalm 106? Yes, that's the same Pinchas, yes. The same Pinchas who's mentioned, in fact, there's a whole section in the Torah called Pinchas. It's a story about him. But he's referred to as well in Psalm 106, yes. The executed job is how the plague was stopped. Yes, that's right. Yeah, there was a plague which was basically caused by, unfortunately, improper sexual behavior. I think we're experiencing some of that plague now, actually, between you and me. In any event, okay. You are welcome, Ben. Yep. All right, I see there's no more questions, so I will post this on the YouTube channel at some time a little bit later, as soon as it's processed, which takes some time. Okay, thank you all, and have a very good night and an excellent weekend. And things are, there's always good in the world. So let's look at the good in the world. If you look at that class, you'll see what I mean. All righty. Good night, everybody. All the best. Welcome.